You are enjoying the contrast of your time and place? Such a telling question. You're enjoying the fresh new desire that continually focuses within you? You meant that. You're coming to recognize that the variety which causes you to discern and decide, that the preferences that are born within you, no matter how specific or general, no matter how intense or soft, that these preferences are indeed the summoning of Source. So whether the preference has been manifested immediately or not, the summoning of Source has still occurred, yes? So life still flows, yes? And are you understanding that with each new desire and each new fulfillment of each new desire comes a new perspective from which you prefer? So are you getting it that the influx of new preferences is truly an eternal experience? Which means we'll never get it done? Which means, here's the big one, this is the one you really want to answer yes to. Which means there will always be unfulfilled desires. There will always be preferences that are unfulfilled. There will always be that new leading edge in this moment, something that you want that has not yet come into full fruition, because you will never stop preferring and it will never stop coming. So when you get into the spirit of that and you start realizing that there will always be something unfulfilled, but because you understand that, you don't feel frustration about it not being fulfilled. Instead, you focus upon the life-giving quality of the desire that is bubbling within you. Now you're on track. Now you're who you are. Now you are physically focused, source energy, focused in this time-space reality, with the variety of your time-space reality continuing to summon through you new life force. So you are eagerly unfinished, eagerly incomplete, satisfied in your incompletion. We just keep pushing, don't we? Happy that there is more to come, and pleased with what has come. We really want to put emphasis there. I like where I stand, and I'm happy about where I'm going. You are source energy focused here. And in every moment, there is this powerful juncture where you meet you. And we would really like to soften those words a bit by saying you can never be apart from you. But we would like to emphasize your awareness of that connection by saying you have an emotional guidance system which lets you know how complete or how much of who you are allowing in any moment. The better you feel, the better the connection. The worse you feel, the worse the connection. So your emotions are literally letting you know your alignment with who you are. Your emotions are letting you know your level of allowing or your level of resisting. Allowing, resisting. Allowing who you are to flow, not allowing as much of who you are to flow. So when you realize that your emotions are your indicator, and you adore your indicator, in other words, when you look at the gas gauge on your automobile and it tells you that your tank is approaching empty, you don't take a hammer and just beat that right out of the dashboard, irritated that the indicator is negative. Instead, you appreciate the indicator and you do something about it. Now, while we know some of you push it, you'll drive until there's not a drop of gas, and you wait until you're off on the side of the road before you do something about it. And some of you tend to do that with your emotions too. You sort of run completely out of source And then you do something about it. And it's harder to do something about it if you noticed when your tank's empty. You got to call AAA. That's Abraham. But if you do not wait until your tank is completely empty, then it's easier for you to bring yourself back into alignment. And so your emotions are so important. Sometimes we see you, and you will find yourself in a place of negative emotion. And because you've been listening to us, or because you've been listening to somebody who's been listening to us, you know, one of those bright-eyed, bushy-tailed Abraham students of deliberate creation, and at the first whiff of negative emotion that they detect in you, they will announce to you, you know, you are the creator of your own reality. And then they go on to explain to you that negative emotion is not a good indicator and that you should get rid of it right away. And they use Abraham expressions like, you know, you should pivot. In other words, you should not embrace this negative emotion. You should find some bright-eyed, fluffy place. You should find sunshine, rainbows, and lollipops, and roses. You should reach for a better feeling thought, at which point you would like to just punch their lights out or something. Because you know that from where you stand, you don't have access to that bright thought that they may be displaying in the moment. And so what we're wanting you to hear from all of this is that you really cannot guide yourself from the outside. You can't let some set of rules or even some other very well-meaning, very well-connected to source energy person guide you about what you should do, because law of attraction says that which is likened to itself is drawn. Law of attraction says that if you've been beating the drum of some thought that has brought you to a place of severe negative emotion, that you in that moment don't have access to a thought that is on the other end of the vibrational spectrum. You just can't go from depression, which is the suffocating furthest emotion from full connection, all the way to ecstasy or passion or enthusiasm. You can't go there in one fell swoop. It is not vibrationally possible any more than you can set your radio tuner receiver on one radio station and receive what's being broadcast on another. The vibrations have to sync up, and your vibrations have to sync up too. So when you find yourself in this place of negative emotion, let's talk about a strong negative emotion, depression. We want to help you to realize that what that feeling is the disallowing of the fullness of who you are. Now, the fullness of who you are, what's on the other end of that spectrum? The fullness of who you are is empowered. So on the other end of the fullness of who you are, empowered, on the other end is disempowered. Who you really are is free. On the other end of that is a feeling of not being free. Who you really are is empowered and free. And anything that causes you in the moment to beat the drum or feel disempowerment or loss of freedom is the furthest on the vibrational, emotional spectrum that you can go. So let's say, for sake of example, that you're in that place of feeling disempowered. Something has happened, you feel betrayed. Someone has died, you are feeling strong grief. You are focused upon something and you feel absolutely powerless to do anything about it. Well, we can understand why that emotion would feel so bad, can't you? Because as you beat the drum of that, you are disallowing the fullness of the source energy that is really you. So then, in that feeling, and this is the thing we really want you to focus upon, because your emotions are feeling indicators, feeling responses to the vibration of thought. So in that feeling of grief, someone says to you, you know, you should get happy. And while they may very well be right, you can't get happy. You don't have access to that. So what we are suggesting is that you reach for the feeling that you do have access to that is an improvement from the grief that you are feeling or from the utter disempowerment that you are feeling. So let's say you find an angry thought. You're angry at the person who has died, or you're angry at someone who didn't help them enough, or you're angry at someone who wasn't nice to them when they were alive, or you're angry at them for not living longer, or in other words, it doesn't really matter where you go. You just reach for a thought that feels better than the grief. So you find this refreshing thought of rage. Now, those words don't seem like they go together, do they? But when you put it into context, that feeling of rage, as far as you are feeling, was an improvement over that suffocating grief. And only you know that you've made the improvement. Now, something that often goes very wrong is you make your sometimes even unconscious improved way to anger or rage. And now you can breathe again. But somebody who doesn't know where you are, who doesn't feel where you are, is watching you from the outside, and they are now disapproving of your anger. So then they announce to you that your anger is inappropriate. At which time you return to your grief or disempowerment. And what we're wanting you to hear and know and feel is that they don't know. You knew that it felt better, and if you will consciously acknowledge, hey, I may not be over there in the bright, fluffy, sunshine and roses thoughts like you are, but I do feel better than I felt. And in the moment that you acknowledge that you were able to choose a thought that felt better than the way you were feeling before, you have reclaimed your power. And once you've done that, you can go anywhere up the vibrational scale. Until you acknowledge that you have chosen a thought, you will not be in power when you still feel that something outside of you is controlling the way you feel. And do you know that that is at the root of all things that you fear? At the root of all things that trouble you is the feeling that somehow you will not have the power to feel the way you want to feel. Do you know that there isn't anything that you want, whether it's a material object, a state of being, a condition, there is a relationship, there is nothing that you want or that you have ever wanted that is for any other reason than you think you will feel better when you have it. And so we can certainly understand how a feeling of suffocating negative emotion would scare you because you feel completely out of control. It is so contrary to who you really are. So next time you feel negative emotion, and it doesn't matter where you are on this vibrational spectrum, next time you feel negative emotion, let your new mantra be, I'm going to reach for the best feeling that I have access to. Now this is a little bit of a modification over our formerly encouraged words of follow your bliss. Because when you are in the depths of despair and someone says follow your bliss, you would like to say, but when you understand that you have the ability to change your feeling just a little bit, then you can change your feeling to anything. So here you are, you're in despair, you're in that terrible grief, and you reach for thought, and it feels like anger, and it feels like relief to you. And now, from your thought of anger, you have access to thoughts of strong aggravation. And from those feelings of strong aggravation, you have access to thoughts of frustration. And from frustration, you have access to thoughts of overwhelmment. And from overwhelmment, you have access to thoughts of pessimism. And from your feelings of pessimism, you have thoughts of hopefulness, hopeful pessimism. You have thoughts of hopeful pessimism. You have thoughts of optimistic pessimism. You have thoughts of optimism. You have thoughts of belief. You have thoughts of absolute belief. You have thoughts of knowing. But you didn't get there all at once, you see. And this is the thing that we want you to begin to feel. We want you to begin saying, I can choose how I feel, but I can't choose this from this. So when you begin saying, I can choose, and I'll start wherever I am. Sometimes you'll see people sit in the chair, and you'll hear us unwilling to go where they seem to want to go. Because they're up here in frustration, overwhelmment, and every word they speak is taking them into deeper frustration, into stronger anger. And we really don't want to move down the scale, we want to move up the scale.